mantel clock he carried through the pines and pink beds across Pisgah Mountains to home. Rhododendrons bloomed in pink profusion. He gathered a few near Pigeon River for his dearly beloved Mary. In the early days of June 1862, it was an old squirrel rifle he carried through the pines and pink beds across the Blue Ridge Mountains to war. The timekeeper chimed with every disquieting hour. The windings marked lonely days for his dearly beloved Mary. This same grandfather was always listed as a farmer, but we had word from my great aunt that he was also a shoe cobbler. So this is called A Pocket Full of Tacks. He was a common farmer. Still, he could cobble shoes with nails, pegs, or tacks. He left his mountain home in leather brogans designed to last a soldier's marching in ankle-deep mud or snow for a year, perhaps more, but never for 2 or 3. When new boots were scarce, when rain or mud seeped in, and feet were not quite bare, if there were broken soles or pieces of leather spared, he could patch up or repair. When orders came for 20 miles of hard marching, and the shrill bugle or drum sounded out, when knapsacks and heavy loads were shouldered on, he became the patron saint of shoe cobblers. And you're smiling, you understand how important that was to have shoes to march, because they marched many, many miles sometimes. This poem is about one of the great-great-grandmothers who was about 5 feet, Teresa, about 5 feet tall, a little bit of a thing, and she, like all the other wives and family members, wanted a letter. They wanted to hear that their loved one was okay. And so this is a story about grandmother Miriam. Silently, a mountain morning broke over 5 hills along the east fork of Pigeon River. The mailman had failed so long to write his route for dreaded fear of roaming renegades. She waited for a word, somewhere in the beauty of Great Smoky Mountains, a word from somewhere in the ugliness of the war. Miriam was denied her neighbor's horse, but not the chance to steal it away. Steal it away and risk her life and good name, to risk all comfort for willful hope that just one letter was waiting there. With eyes cast down, she rode the horse back through a blue haze, Carolina's high country, resonating now with words she read out loud. Slowly, to the sweet mountain morning, to the east fork of Pigeon, to the 5 glorious hills, to the stolen horse, and to herself. I'm not sure what the neighbor did when he found out the horse had...
Well, she knocked on the door and told him, I brought your horse back.
And my letter. I've got my letter.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think I know that in this area there were divided loyalties. What was the situation over there where they lived?
It was saying, it was probably not as much so as it was here in Madison County, but there were Union sympathizers in Haywood, and it was very difficult for them, even if you were suspected of being a sympathizer, a Northern sympathizer. But we didn't have the Shelton Laurel massacre like you all had here. So I can't say that it was as prevalent here. But would you like to share something there, your feelings on that?
I don't know if I have anything to say about it. I don't really know the history. I'm not from around here, so I don't know the history around here. But my wife, who wasn't able to be here, but she's been studying both her mother and father father's side from East Tennessee,
Uh-huh.
and she said that on her father's side, back, sort of a great-grandmother type, uh, that from that point forward in their family, her father said, nobody ever said anything about the war. It was as if, because there were people in Monroe County, Tennessee. I mean, they had people killing their neighbors and all that, so it was just that you just didn't talk about it.
Right.
Because you might not know whose ancestors were on which
That's
side
right.
now. So you didn't take a chance in discussing it.
It was very sensitive. It was very thorny. It was very complicated. Even, and we've all seen the movies, but family members, not only your neighbor up the road, but family members had divided loyalties, and Haywood County in North Carolina was the last state to secede. They did not want to go to war. They weren't particularly for the South or for the North. They just didn't want to fight. And so they were the last state to secede, yet they sacrificed and lost more than any other southern state. And they were so close to the Union lines, and there were so many battles and skirmishes here. And so many of the soldiers, these two grandfathers in the Cherokee Indians, because they knew these mountains, they were very important and critical soldiers because they knew the mountains. And the Union soldiers didn't know them, they didn't know their way around, and so they felt like these men were very important. And so everyone, when conscription came in 1862, after Lincoln had called the troops for the North, they had to enforce conscription. And that meant that you had to sign up and you had to join and you had to go. And if you did not, you might not even survive, because there were many who would just go, they're called the home guard, and they would go, and if you weren't enlisted and you didn't fight, you were a traitor. And if they suspected you of having divided loyalties, many times they were also shot.
We found out that in East Tennessee, for one, the state is, it runs east and west, and the west was heavily slave owners.
Yes.
And the east was lightly slave owners.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of Union sympathizers who were slave owners. I mean, there were people who wanted to preserve the Union because their near ancestors had fought in the Revolution.
Yes.
And so they were for the Union, but they still were not against slavery. And so it was just a very complicated thing. It wasn't just north-south, or slavery, or pro-slavery. And so they, in some of the elections in East Tennessee, of course they were all run locally, and it wasn't a secret ballot. You went and put your ballot in a particular box, depending on how you were voting. Mm-hmm. And there were cases where you would vote and go home, and somebody would come and get you with a gun and say, "We'd like for you to vote again." So you would go and vote again, and vote the right way.
Yeah.
So it was that open and contentious.
It was very difficult, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. These are stories that you're telling me. These are stories of our ancestors and just a common man who didn't have a lot of choices, and they were caught up in this horrible war, and it went on so long. It just got worse. So it was just a difficult time for everyone. Whether you had, my grandfather had, as far as I know, a slave woman that lived with him and cooked and took care of the children. They didn't have a large farm. They didn't have slaves. They didn't have a lot of money. And so slavery was never an issue for them. It was never the reason they went. They went to protect their homes because they were being raided and invaded. And when you stop and put yourself in that situation, you have a home and a family, and you think someone's going to come and cause you harm, you would do the same thing. And then conscription came, and they had no choice then. They had to go. Well, this is
There,
the,
excuse
sorry,
me,
yes,
just a little
Bill.
anecdote here.
Yes.
In Hot Springs, there was a 2-3 day skirmish here. And the commanding officers of both sides were brothers.
Yeah. Oh.
Confederacy won the first day, I think, and then the Union. The Union won the first day. Cleared the
Yeah, they went
field.
back and forth.
And then the Confederates chased them out the next day.
Yeah. Yes, this was a
So
very
they both had great.
strategic area here. It was very, important that,
Yes,
that they control
Cumberland
it.
Pike.
That's right, the Cumberland Pike, that's right. Well, this next poem is about this grandmother who stole the horse. And this was a saying, I don't know if you've ever heard it, to make someone step. She made them step,